You've smelled it. That sharp, acrid scent that cuts through the air on a city street. The unmistakable smell of smoke. Maybe you've never touched a cigarette. Maybe you never will. But your brain knows that smell. It registers it before you even notice. And here's what's strange. Every time you smell smoke, something ancient stirs in your mind. Something that connects you to your ancestors. And the real answer is far stranger than you think. Because when you look at the evidence, you discover that humans have been inhaling smoke for as long as we've been human. Not just tobacco, not just cannabis, but something much deeper. A relationship with fire and smoke that predates our species entirely. Think about that. Your earliest ancestors, the ones who walked the savannah hundreds of thousands of years ago, they already understood fire. They already understood smoke. And they already understood that when you put certain plants into the fire, something remarkable happened. The history of human smoking is not a story of addiction. It's not a story of modern vice. It's a story of our species, of our desire to transcend ourselves, of our search for meaning. And it's a story that's still being written inside your own brain, every single day. Let's go back to the beginning. Before tobacco, before cannabis, before any of the plants we associate with smoking today. The earliest evidence of humans intentionally burning plants and inhaling the smoke comes from a cave in the Judean hills, near modern-day Israel. Archaeologists found traces of cannabis residue on a stone altar that dates back nearly 3,000 years. That was around 900 BC. But here's the thing. That's not the earliest evidence. That's just the earliest evidence we've found so far. The real story goes much deeper. In the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia, archaeologists have discovered something extraordinary. Ancient burial sites dating back to around 2500 BC. Inside these tombs, they found wooden braziers with burnt plant matter. And when they analyzed the residue, they found something surprising. It was cannabis. But here's what makes it remarkable. These weren't just random burns. The cannabis had been specifically prepared for burning. Someone had carefully selected the plant material, placed it into the brazier, and ignited it. For a purpose. For a ritual. Dr. Mark Merlin, an anthropologist who studied the history of cannabis, documented this evidence. He found that these ancient people weren't just using cannabis for fuel. They were using it for ceremony, for healing, for something that mattered deeply to them. But wait, if humans were using cannabis for ritual purposes in 2500 BC, that means we've been smoking for at least 4,500 years. And that's just the evidence we've found. So here's the question. Is that the beginning? Or is that just the beginning of what we've discovered so far? Now let's talk about tobacco. Most people think tobacco is a modern invention, a new world discovery that spread across the globe after Columbus. But here's the truth. Tobacco has been cultivated in the Americas for at least 8,000 years. That's 6,000 BC. 8,000 years of humans carefully selecting, growing, and preparing tobacco leaves. 8,000 years of humans inhaling tobacco smoke. Archaeologists have found tobacco seeds in ancient human settlements in the southwestern United States. They've found the carbonized remains of tobacco leaves in ancient caves. And they've found something else. Something that tells us just how deeply this plant was woven into ancient human life. They've found pipes. Simple, hand-carved stone pipes. Some of them date back to 1000 BC. And here's the fascinating part. These pipes were often carved into the shapes of animals, birds, or human figures. They weren't just tools. They were sacred objects. They were part of a ritual that connected the smoker to the spirit world, to the ancestors, to something beyond the ordinary. In 2015, a team of researchers led by Dr. Karen Hardy published a study that changed our understanding of ancient human plant use. They analyzed the residues on stone tools from a cave in the Basque Country of Spain. These tools were used by Neanderthals, and they found something astonishing. The tools had traces of plant compounds that were known to have psychoactive properties. That meant Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives, were likely using plants for therapeutic or ritual purposes. They were interacting with plant chemicals in ways we never knew. Now think about what this means. If Neanderthals were using psychoactive plants, then the human relationship with plant smoke goes back even further. Much further. Neanderthals lived from about 400,000 years ago to about 40,000 years ago. So this human practice of burning and inhaling plant smoke, is at least 400,000 years old. Possibly even older. But let's go even deeper, because here's where it gets truly counterintuitive. The evidence suggests that smoking wasn't originally about getting high. And it wasn't about addiction. It was about something else entirely. Something that has been with us since the dawn of human consciousness. When you look at the anthropology of ancient human smoking, you find a consistent pattern. Across cultures, across continents, across millennia, the practice of smoking plant material was almost always embedded in ritual. It was part of ceremonies, part of healing, part of social bonding. The smoke was seen as a bridge, a way to carry prayers and offerings up to the heavens, a way to communicate with spirits, a way to mark transitions, birth, coming of age, marriage, death. All of these moments were accompanied by smoke. In ancient North America, tobacco was so sacred that it was often used as a currency. It was traded across vast distances, but not for economic reasons, for ceremonial reasons. The Navajo, the Cherokee, the Iroquois, all of them had deep traditions around tobacco smoking. But here's the key difference. They didn't smoke tobacco the way we do today. They didn't inhale deeply. They didn't chase a nicotine buzz. They used tobacco in small, measured amounts, often in mixtures with other plants. They respected the plant. They understood that it had power. So what changed? What turned this sacred ritual into a global addiction? The answer is surprisingly recent. It's a story of commerce, of colonization, of industrialization, and of the human brain. When Europeans arrived in the Americas, they encountered tobacco for the first time. They saw the indigenous peoples smoking it. They tried it, and they liked it, but they didn't understand the ritual. They didn't understand the sacred context. They saw a commodity, and they saw an opportunity. By the 1600s, tobacco had become a global trade commodity. Ships carried it across the Atlantic. Plantations in the American colonies grew it on an industrial scale. And the demand was insatiable. Why? Because nicotine is addictive. The human brain, it turns out, is exquisitely sensitive to the chemicals in tobacco smoke. Let's stop here and think about that. Nicotine. It's a chemical that evolved in the tobacco plant. It evolved as a defense mechanism, a way to deter insects from eating the plant's leaves. But it evolved something else too. It evolved a shape that fit perfectly into a human receptor. A receptor in the brain. A receptor that, when stimulated, releases dopamine. The reward chemical. The chemical that tells your brain, this feels good, do it again. And here's the twist. That receptor didn't evolve to fit nicotine. The receptor was already there. It was already a part of your brain's reward system. A system that evolved over millions of years to encourage you to seek out food, water, and social connection. Nicotine just happened to fit perfectly into that system. It hijacked it. And once nicotine hijacked your brain's reward system, the rest was inevitable. By the 19th century, smoking had transformed from a sacred ritual into a global habit. Cigarettes, which were originally a cheap alternative to cigars and pipes, became the dominant form of tobacco use. And they became something else too. They became a symbol of modernity, of sophistication, of rebellion, and of addiction. In 1913, the R.J. Reynolds Company introduced the Camel cigarette. It was the first mass-market cigarette brand. And it changed everything. By the 1950s, the majority of adults in the Western world were smokers. And the health consequences were just beginning to be understood. But here's the deeper question. Why did we, as a species, so readily embrace smoking? Why did we so eagerly inhale the smoke of a plant from the other side of the world? The answer lies in your brain. The same brain that made your ancestors burn sacred plants in ancient ceremonies. The same brain that drove Neanderthals to use plant compounds tens of thousands of years ago. And the same brain that still, today, drives you to seek out experiences that alter your consciousness. You are part of a species that has always been fascinated by altered states, by the experience of being something other than ordinary, by the mystery of consciousness itself. That's not a modern trait. That's a deeply ancient trait. One that predates civilization. One that predates language. One that predates our own species. In 2017, a team of researchers led by Dr. Richard Evershed published a landmark study on the history of cannabis use. They analyzed the remains of ancient cannabis plants from a burial site in China. The site dated to around 2500 BC, and they found something remarkable. The cannabis had been cultivated. It had been selectively bred. The ancient people who grew it were choosing plants with higher concentrations of psychoactive compounds. They knew what they were doing. They were growing cannabis specifically for its mind-altering effects, and they were doing it over 4,000 years ago. Now that's extraordinary. 4,000 years of purposeful cultivation, for a plant that had no nutritional value, no practical value as fuel, only one value, its effect on the human mind. And here's the counterintuitive part. Those ancient people weren't addicts. They weren't chasing a dopamine rush. They were searching for something else, something we still search for today. Connection, a transcendence, a glimpse beyond the ordinary. So let's bring this back to you. Every time you see someone smoke, every time you smell smoke in the air, you're not just witnessing a modern vice. You're witnessing a deeply ancient human behavior, a behavior that stretches back hundreds of thousands of years, a behavior that connects your ancestors to you. Think about the last time you experienced something that felt transcendent. Maybe it was a sunset. Maybe it was the birth of a child. Maybe it was a piece of music that moved you to tears. In that moment, you were experiencing something that your ancient ancestors also experienced. The desire to transcend the mundane, to touch something deeper, something sacred. When you smell smoke, you're smelling a connection to your ancient past. You're smelling the same mixture of carbon and plant material that your ancestors inhaled. The same mixture that carried their prayers upward. The same mixture that connected them to the spirit world. That's not a coincidence. That's human nature. So here's the question. Not when did ancient humans start smoking, but why? Why did we, as a species, decide to inhale smoke? The answer is simple. Because we've always been looking for something more. More meaning. More connection, more understanding, and smoke was one of the ways we found it. Your ancestors burned plants for ritual. They burned them for healing. They burned them for ceremony. And they passed that behavior down to you, through culture, through genetics, through the deep structures of your brain. Today, you probably don't smoke. And if you do, you know the risks. But that doesn't change the deeper truth. You are still a member of a species that has always sought transcendence. A species that has always used the tools available to alter consciousness. Whether through smoke, through meditation, through music, through art. The drive is the same. When you lit that candle last night, the smoke curled upward. When you sat by a campfire, the smoke drifted into your lungs. When you smelled barbecue smoke drifting across a summer evening, something stirred in your brain. Something ancient, something deeply human. So the next time you smell smoke, pause for just a moment. Don't judge it. Just notice it. Notice how your brain registers it. Notice how it makes you feel. And think about this. Your ancestors, thousands of years ago, smelled the same thing, felt the same thing, and connected it to something sacred. You're not just a modern human. You're the latest chapter in a story that began hundreds of thousands of years ago. A story of fire. A story of smoke. A story of searching for something beyond the ordinary. And that story is still being written. In your life. In your choices. In the moments when you reach for something more. You've smelled it. That sharp, acrid scent. And now you know the rest of the story. The story of when ancient humans started smoking. The story of why we still do.